You can begin whenever you wish.
Great, thank you very much, Madam Clerk. Welcome, everyone. This is a special council meeting, but before we begin, just want to remind you, of course, that the meeting is going to be recorded and live streamed on the Township's YouTube channel. We'll go through and call the roll, and please raise your hand when I call your name. We have Deputy Mayor Nelson.
Present.
Councillor Watt.
Present.
Councillor Johnston.
Present.
I believe Councillor Vervoort's on his way in, but perhaps not yet. Madam Clerk?
Not yet.
Okay, we'll carry on. Of course, myself, Heather Watson. We have our clerk, Martina Chait-Hartwig.
Good afternoon.
CAO Alana Arthurs. Manager of Parks and Recreation, Mike Mood.
Good evening.
Hello, and I don't believe there's any other staff on this call.
That's correct.
We're good. Okay, thank you. So we do have quorum in attendance, so I will call the meeting to order. The purpose of today's meeting is to hear a presentation from Douro-Dummer, who's with Simcoe, regarding a grant opportunity from FCM, which is Federation of Canadian Municipalities, regarding greenhouse gas reduction at our community centers. And I believe that Mr. Dermo is joining us by Zoom, but I will hand it over to Mr. Mood for the official introduction.
Yeah, thank you, and good evening, and through you, I've been in talks with Jordan through Simcoe Refrigeration in regards to this greenhouse gas reduction pathway feasibility study. And we've invited her to come here and give a presentation to council to give you an overview of what that actual study looks like. So again, I'll turn it over to Jordan if she's ready.
Welcome, Ms.
Yes.
Dermo.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be speaking with you today. I'm looking forward to actually kind of helping discuss this journey to net zero with your community. So I do have a presentation set up. You'll have to bear with me. I'm not used to using Zoom, but if I am able to share my screen, I can get kind of started on that presentation. I am going to turn my camera back off. I apologize. I just know that the feed can not be the best if I've got my camera on and I'm sharing my screen as well. But yeah, I'm Jordan from Simcoe, and I'm part of the decarbonization team that we've established.
Jordan, you should be able to share your screen whenever you're ready.
Perfect.
Perfect, we can see that now.
Okay, you have the full screen?
Correct.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so we're talking about net zero for your communities and unlocking the potential of thermal management along with government grants. So there is a big discussion and push on lowering our GHG emissions globally, let alone just our country and then within our municipalities. And Simcoe Refrigeration, because of our experience and longevity in this industry, we recognize the potential that moving heat and moving energy essentially around can play in helping lower that carbon footprint and then accessing the government grants that are available there. So just a quick little brief intro on Simcoe. So we've actually been around since 1913 as the Canadian ice making company. So we know a thing or two about making things cool. And we are the largest thermal solution provider within North America. So we do design, engineering, manufacturing, installation, automation, as well as maintenance. And this is why in 2019 and 2020, we were actually asked to participate in the Mayor's Megawatt Challenge, which was a cohort project put on by Climate Challenge Network. And what this cohort project did was it looked at 9 municipal ice rinks and established a feasible pathway for them to lower their GHG emissions, and ultimately gave a high-level business plan that compares business as usual against these low carbon upgrades. So the way that the study the cohort project, and the study was outlined, is that we would first establish the emissions baseline. And this is looking at more than just the refrigeration plant. It's looking at like the HVAC systems, the insulation, your R value within each building, and then establishing what can actually be done to reduce your GHG footprint, and along the pathway of when it should be done. So not just an all-in-one solution. We want to look at what actually makes sense based on the end of life for a lot of these pieces of equipment. And then showing the financial analysis. So there's 3 financial analysis, and it would be business as usual, keeping things status quo, versus our low carbon measures, meeting the reduction targets that the government of Canada has put on, which is 50% GHG reduction by 2030 and an 80% GHG reduction by 2050. And then also, if we wanted to escalate this timeline, so instead of meeting those targets, what could we do to meet that 80% reduction within 5 years? So we're actually preparing 3 business plans for each individual facility. And the reason that we are involved in this is because when it comes to a municipal breakdown, arenas and ice plants make up a large portion of the natural gas that is consumed along with the electricity. This here is just arenas in general, but we also know that multi-purpose buildings can most likely include an arena. So we know that they do take a big chunk of this pie, more or less. And then if we break it down even further, most of the electrical usage within an arena goes to removing heat. We're running those compressors, we're running those brine pumps, we're running dehumidification, and all of that, in order to actually function, requires electricity. At the same time, while we're removing heat, we're also creating heat through a completely different system within that building. And typically we are using natural gas in order to actually create that heat. And a majority of natural gas usage within a municipal breakdown goes all towards the refrigeration plant and keeping people being able to actually use the facility. So if we look at, these are the 9 rinks that were in the cohort project. So I'm just going to focus kind of overly on the results of this. Combined, these 9 arenas will have an annual GHG emissions totaling 2,441 tons of CO2 equivalent annually. By following the GHG reduction pathway that was outlined, we can actually get that down to 252 tons, which is a significant difference. On average, it was about an 88% reduction in GHG emissions. The nice thing with that, though, is because we're looking at how we can offset, say, natural gas with electrification, we actually, on average, had a 35% reduction in utility costs. So annually, by following these plans, these 9 arenas will have a combined savings of over $1.3 million a year. When it comes to Canada alone, we have the largest number of arenas globally. I think we've got about 3,500 just arenas across Canada, and we're Canadian, so it's definitely a great place to start when we're talking about lowering our GHG emissions. Most of the emission savings comes from that refrigeration plant as well. We're looking, again, dehumidification, ventilation, heating, and then making cold. The studies look at the 3 pillars that are needed to achieve net zero, and it's all going to be specified for your specific location. What actually makes sense for you guys? So starting with optimizing energy consumption, we also want to look at harnessing green power. And then one of the pillars that is often overlooked is eliminating refrigerant emissions. So when we're talking about refrigerant emissions, and this is again why Simcoe has made commitments regarding synthetic refrigerants. We have 2 different types of refrigerants. We have natural refrigerants, which would be like CO2 or ammonia. And these are just chemical compounds that are found naturally within the universe. And they have for ammonia has a 0 ODP, so that's ozone depletion potential, and 0 GWP, which is a global warming potential. Where CO2 has 0 ODP and then a 1 global warming potential. So CO2 is essentially the baseline that we would compare all other refrigerants to. 1 pound of CO2 is equivalent to 1 pound of CO2 within being released into the environment. Whereas when you're looking at some synthetic refrigerants, there has been a big history when it comes to different types of synthetic CFCs, HCFCs, HFCs, and then HFOs. And these will vary depending on the type of chemical that's involved. So either going to have extremely high ODPs, which were then phased out through the Montreal Protocol, to newer HFCs and HFOs, which have either zero ODP and a high GWP, or they will have a lower GWP. Greenpeace actually equates about 10% of global warming to these synthetic refrigerant emissions, and it just releases and leaks into the atmosphere. This is why in 1987, developing nations across the globe signed the Montreal Protocol, which focused on ozone depletion potential. And then we also signed the Kigali Amendment in 2017, which then furthers the phase down and looks at the actual GWP. So we just had a phase out of R22, which was a pretty standardly used refrigerants, especially in arenas. As of 2020, it's no longer being produced. In January 1st, 2024, we're going to our next phase out, which is any refrigerant for this sort of application under 750 GWPs. And by 2035, I think we're expected to have about an 80% phase down of refrigerants. So we know that we want to make sure we're future-proofing anything that we're doing by going with a refrigerant that is not running the risk of actually being phased out due to these harmful chemicals. This is just a little quick overview of the refrigerant phase-outs. I don't need into that. On top of the refrigerant phase-outs, with synthetic refrigerants, the cost, especially when it comes to manufacturing, as they become harder and harder to acquire, then the cost continues to go up. Whereas we can see actually natural refrigerants has stayed relatively the same. So the second pillar would be harnessing green power. And like I said, this is something where we want to make sure that it makes sense for your location. Some locations, geothermal is an actual resource that we should look into, whereas other locations, it doesn't actually make sense, whether it's the water table, just logistically, it doesn't make sense. But then we can look at solar PV. What can we do to your buildings that would help offset electrical consumptions? Because at the end of the day, the sun is never going to increase their electrical rates. While renewables are great, especially when it comes to utility costs, for these arenas, they actually only equaled about 6% of the total GHG savings. And that is where there's a big disconnect, and I'll get into a little bit later, where energy efficiency versus actual GHG reduction. Then we also want to look at optimizing energy consumption. And that would look at like lighting, switching to LED lights, building enclosures, what sort of our value is your ceiling. Could we put in low E ceilings? How much would that save you when it comes to just efficiency and that insulation in your building? Your windows, are they single pane right now? Can we look at going to triple pane when you're replacing them? So it is all encompassing. It is not just the refrigeration and HVAC systems. Then we obviously want to look at operational improvements. So specifically with ice rinks, what is our ice thickness that we're keeping at? Can we decrease that ice thickness in order to have our plant not having to work as hard? What is our dehumidification set at? Like different sort of things that are easy, low-hanging fruit when it comes to just increasing your efficiency, including HVAC and ventilation. Dehumidification does play a big role. A lot of facilities will have gas-powered dehumidification. That in itself is going to have a high carbon footprint. It's also going to cost more, but there are other desiccant equivalents that we can also look into as well, and making sure that we have the proper humidity levels within our facilities, so we don't have an increase in ice built on your equipment, which is to increase the actual how hard your Obviously looking at energy efficient equipment and technologies like VFDs, and then putting it all together into control systems. How can we make our system work smarter and not harder, having those setbacks? If we don't have anyone scheduled to use the ice, then why are we maintaining the ice at the normal temperature? We can allow our system to kind of cool off, but the opposite of that, and not work as hard. And then 2 hours before we actually have something on the schedule, that's when we have our system then go in and make sure that ice is at the optimal temperature. Then one of the biggest things to look into is heat recovery and de-superheaters or heat pumps. So this is what kind of really attracted me to this job, because before I got into this industry, I never really knew or cared how ice was made, and most people don't necessarily have that understanding as well. Or it's just, oh, it's a cold building, and that's why there's ice on the floor. But when you're actually looking at a traditional arena, like I said, we are removing heat from the floor. So there's no such thing as cold. Cold is just the absence of heat. With a refrigeration plant, it's actually going to be more efficient than your most efficient HVAC system out there. To put it into kind of simplistic terms, for every 1 kilowatt of energy it takes to remove heat from that ice surface floor, the waste byproduct is equivalent to about 4 kilowatts of heat. So we have a 1-to-4 ratio when it comes to our efficiency. So 400 times more efficient at creating heat than it is at even making cold. And then typically we're just releasing that into the atmosphere through our condenser. At the exact same time, we are using gas-powered equipment to create heat in order to provide space heating and comfort heating, to heat the water for the ice resurfacer, to, if you have a snowmelt pit, we're generating heat in order to put it back into the building. So we have 2 different systems that are essentially doing the same thing, just in reverse, working against each other. So by taking the waste heat, we can then offset our natural gas consumption significantly. And how this would look, we're looking at one specific rink. So this was rink 1 in the cohort project. And this was a bit of a larger facility. Their baseline was established to be at 628 tons of CO2 emissions annually. Of that, gas emissions made up 542 tons of that. Your electric emissions only made up 85.9. By implementing the low carbon upgrades that were identified, we can get them down 88%, down to 74.3 tons of CO2. And pretty well all of that comes from reducing our gas emissions by looking at how we can offset that natural gas. You can see here the electrical emissions only went from 85.9 down to 64.6. And this is a big thing to consider when you're looking at these studies, is we don't want to just look at energy efficiency. We can only get so far by making things more efficient. We actually have to zoom out and see how we can make our facility and the systems that are involved in this facility run in unison, have that synergy between them. And this is where it gets fun, especially with the financial analysis. So with rink 1, all of the initial outlays of costs, it's projected to cost them about $4.4 million to incorporate all of the GHG reduction opportunity. Because of the offset and the utility savings, they're expected to save over $200,000 a year in utilities, which then gives us the net present value, which is really important, especially when we're talking to the community and providing that justification for why we would like to invest in these low carbon opportunities. We want to look at the entire life cycle costing. How much does this system actually cost us at the end of its life, and not just looking at those base numbers? So at the end of its life, or at the end of this 35-year period here, they're expected to have this facility now be in the positives for net present value at almost $9 million. Whereas if you compare that, actually, I'm skipping ahead. And this just shows the cash flow diagram, which I find much nicer when it comes to just visualizing. So the blue blocks here indicate years and projects that are going to be adapted. The green line is the associated utility savings, whereas the red line is the cumulative cash flow. So money in versus money, money saved versus money out. So that's how we actually get a break-even point at this facility at 2034. So by 2034, this community service that is typically doesn't have a return on investment. Sorry, I'm stopping for a second. There's an echo on my end, which is fine, but I just want to make sure everyone can hear me okay on your end.
I think we're okay. I hear a little bit of an echo also, but certainly on Zoom it's okay. Madam Clerk, is it okay in the chambers?
Yeah, it's actually quite clear. There's no echo for us. Sometimes we do lose a word or two of what you're saying there, Jordan.
Okay. Well, if any questions, just let me know along the way. Thank you for letting me know. So yes, we have,
Sorry, just one very quick question, if I may, through Mayor Watson. What discount rate was used on the NPV calculations?
The discount rate, I have that at the, I have a number in my mind, but I don't want to be wrong. So okay. I'll get back to you on that, but we are using a discount rate.
Okay, thank you.
So then when we compare it to the business as usual, so this is just the cost to actually keep this plant operational and safe. So at the end of the day, no matter what, they're going to be spending roughly $2.2 million on the like-for-like replacements. Because they're like-for-like, we don't expect any utility savings or GHG savings, but that system is still costing us money to run. So at the end of its life cycle, we actually have a negative net present value of almost $3 million. And this is the same cash flow graph, where you're just showing again those purchases out and then running how much it actually costs to operate the facility or the utilities. The other thing to keep in mind too is the increase in carbon tax. In Ontario, we pay very little in carbon tax on our electricity, and it's built into our rate, whereas we have the addition of the carbon tax on natural gas. With that, we sent out a survey to kind of see what a typical very small single pad arena consumption would typically be. And on average, it's about 3,900 cubic meters annually. If this facility is maintaining that consumption, they're going to pay in 2022, they would have paid about $3,900 in carbon tax. Just on that consumption. If they don't do anything and can keep that same consumption, by 2040, they'll be paying just over $22,000. So the idea behind, and I know that there's different discussions regarding the carbon tax right now, but the idea behind the carbon tax is to help continue to fund the green projects and the grants that are coming out. So the way that I like to put it is, you can start to make some changes now and, pay less in carbon tax, or continue doing the same thing and help other communities lower their GHG emissions through the grant opportunities that are out there. So then it's all fine and dandy when we're talking about making these changes, but what funding is available right now? I know that one of the hardest things is providing that justification, especially when it comes to those capital projects, and that is where the feasibility study can give you that bridge by providing
Excuse me, Jordan, I'm just going to pause you for one moment. Madam Clerk, did I see your hand up? Were you trying to signal us?
The deputy mayor has a question for I believe.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Would it be better perhaps to hold questions to the end of the presentation? Is that okay? Sorry, Councillor Vervoort kind of jumped in and surprised me. I didn't see him pop in. So, but if that's okay, Deputy Mayor? Okay, great. Thanks. Sorry about that. Jordan, carry on.
No, nice. So when it comes to actually applying for grants, or even to just provide that justification when you're talking to people like yourself on council, where we don't want to focus on just that initial number. We actually want to look at the big long-term picture. So some of the grants that are available right now, and there are specific ones in different provinces. These I'm just looking at federally. I'm not sure if anyone on the council attempted to apply for the GICB grant that finished in February, at the end of February. But it was an amazing grant that had the opportunity to actually cover up to 80% of some of these projects if you had the information and the plan in order to actually have a very strong application, because it was an incredibly competitive grant. That study would give you what you would need to actually apply for grants like the GICB, including RET screen software. So we would run a RET screen analysis on any of the measures, and RET screen analysis is required by most federal grants. So the Community Building Retrofit Fund is overseen by the FCM, the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, and then the funding pot is the Green Municipal Fund. Eligible communities are any Canadian municipality that is not already deemed a low carbon city. So as long as you are not Vancouver, Edmonton, Calgary, Toronto, Ottawa, Montreal, or the Halifax region, your municipality is eligible for this grant. And this grant is good for athletic facilities, rec facilities, cultural, and community buildings. We have also had wastewater treatment plants and just water treatment plants, fire halls be eligible as well. This funding opportunity, there are 5 streams. As of right now, communities can only apply for 4 of the 5 streams. 2 are for capital projects, and those are the ones that you have to choose one or the other. The first 2 streams are the Community Building and Monitoring Analysis Grant. So this would be for up to 80%, up to $25,000, and this is to put in a monitoring system at one of your facilities if you would like to go that route. So that way you can actually see what energy is being used and just look at how we can what opportunities we can do to improve that energy use. The second one is Community Building Recommissioning Grant. So this is up to 60%, up to $55,000. This one we've actually been working with some communities in order to apply and upgrade their controller at the refrigeration plant. So this is a great one to consider when we're talking about control systems. The 2 capital projects, these ones are established to help kind of get you that capital financing off the hop. So these are the ones that you can only apply for one or the other. The GHG Impact Retrofit Capital is good for one project within one building, whereas the GHG Reduction Pathway Retrofit Capital Project would be good for each year and each project that would be identified within a feasibility study. So if you have a large project in 2026, you would apply for the capital pathway retrofit, and then say in 2028 or 2032, you had another big project in one of the buildings that you applied for, it would have the same opportunity to get the same amount of funding. So this is good it's a grant loan combination. It's for up to 80%, up to $5 million per project. 25% of that 80 is a grant, whereas the remainder would be a low interest green loan that you would be going through the FCM to acquire. But essentially what they're looking at is they're trying to make it so that the savings that you expect can help pay for that long-term loan of these projects. So the difference again between the 2, I think I've got the impact here. So one project in one building, you don't require a full building feasibility study, but you still do require essentially a project feasibility study. You need to still provide that justification as to how much GHG reduction you're going to get, and kind of the long-term financial outlook. Whereas again, the pathway, it would be based off of the results that are obtained within a feasibility study, and it would be good for any building that is included in your feasibility study package. So you could have, your municipal building, your fire hall, your library, everything that could be in that, and then you just have the opportunity to tap into this grant when you have projects that you want to look at. Then finally, mainly what we've been helping communities with is the GHG reduction feasibility studies. So the study that I had gone over previously, there is a grant that will fund up to 80%, up to $65,000 for a single building, or up to $200,000 for a portfolio of buildings. So this is fantastic because when it comes to like the portfolio of buildings, to be able to actually have, again, that business plan, that long-term net zero business plan for each of the buildings that you apply for. So we have been helping communities apply for this grant so far. Without shooting myself in the foot, we've got a 100% success rate on applying for this grant. And we've also maintained our partnership with an energy consultant company. So then that way together we can look at any building within your municipal asset. So not just looking at refrigeration plants, but also looking at that HVAC and everything. With this, we're also offering no financial risk. So we will apply for this grant for you. There are some things that we need your help with, but we've got that pretty streamlined. And then if it was to come back denied for any reason, you're not obligated to move forward. So no money is actually exchanged up front. If you don't get the grant, then you don't have to move forward with the feasibility study. And if you do, then we would go from there. So the grant cycle, they have improved this quite a bit. The full grant application for the feasibility study takes about 6 months now, which is down from about a year, which is great. And that's from the pre-application to the full application. The study itself is going to take anywhere from about 2 to 3 months. And then from there, once the full report is submitted, you would present that to the FCM, they would review it, and then they would actually give that final reimbursement. So with this grant, we can request 70% of that 80 upfront. So then that will help with the capital budgeting for these feasibility studies. And then that remaining 30% would be after you've submitted the docket or the package for the feasibility studies, and then you would get that final distribution. Just some simple projects that we've done, just to kind of highlight some stuff. So the BMO Center in Halifax, this is actually one of the first eco-chill with full heat reclaim projects. I shouldn't say first, but it's been around for a little bit. And this facility is actually recognized as a leader in efficiency and sustainability by the FCM. And by using heat reclaim through their simple eco-chill, they're saving $100,000 per year in utility costs. The town of Halton Hills is actually working on one of the projects so they were one of the rinks within the Mayor's Megawatt, and they successfully applied for grants to do one of the measures that was identified, which is a low charge ammonia heat pump. And so we're in the works of putting that in right now. Here is just a quick little financial analysis. This was another arena here. We're just seeing, again, those initial outlays of cost, looking at it when we're talking about inflation, and then the net savings, the total annual net savings, and the net present value. So this was a different arena. This was not Rink 2. But what you can see here is that business as usual, again, gave them a negative $1.5 million net present value, whereas the other two, the one is if we could utilize without funding, we still have a positive net present value. And then the low carbon with funding, this was utilizing the GICB, and we would have essentially a double when it comes to that positive net present value. Another thing to just think about while we're talking is we are obviously facing a housing crisis as well, which is very exciting because I shouldn't say it's exciting, but it's exciting when it comes to the possibilities. 2 birds, 1 stone. We have also worked on some projects. So North Vancouver, they have an outside arena, and instead of actually releasing that heat into the environment, we tapped into the district energy system that is providing heating and cooling to the surrounding businesses, and we are providing them with waste heat, and which is offsetting the natural gas used within the normal energy system. The other one is a project in Blatchford, Edmonton. We are at the first, maybe the second phase of this project, but this city actually purchased an old aircraft or airplane hangar. I shouldn't say hangar, but field. And what they're doing is they are using a Simcoe EcoChill, and they are using that to provide heating and cooling with heat pumps to right now 1,000 residential homes. The goal is to actually get to 30,000 residential homes with 100% renewable carbon neutral energy. And so they're using a refrigeration system to provide heating and cooling. Right now they're at a 75% less GHG emissions compared to a normal residential community. But their goal by the end of the project is to actually get to 100%. And the way that they're doing it is they develop their own energy corporation. And so they're selling that heating and cooling to those residential buildings, which is just a really neat project to be involved in. So that's the end of my presentation there. So we can go to questions.
Great, thank you very much for that. Deputy Mayor, I saw, of course, you've got a question, but before we do that, I've got a little bit of housekeeping. I got ahead of myself on the agenda. We actually hadn't even done any disclosure of pecuniary interest call. So I'll put that out there before we start any discussion and questions. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? Seeing nothing, we also need an adoption of the agenda. Could I get a motion for the adoption of the agenda, please? Councillor Watt, and seconded by Councillor Johnston. All in favor? And that motion carries. And now back officially to the delegation and Deputy Mayor Nelson, your question.
Yes, thank you, through Madam Mayor. Thanks a lot for your presentation, Jordan. I guess one thing, the biggest issue that jumps out at me is none of our facilities are natural gas. All of our facilities are all electric. And I don't know what propane, but no natural gas. So I guess I just wonder, is that included in all of these reductions, or looking at propane instead of natural gas? And also electric, I guess.
Whatever fuel type you're using is what we would look at. It's just that natural gas is more commonly used, but 100% we would look at offsetting propane as well.
All right, that was my question.
Any other questions from council? No. Okay.
I'm just quickly pulling up the that rate. Just have to wait for my computer to load.
Oh, this was going back to Councillor Vervoort's question?
Yes.
Okay.
So well, you're talking about a discount rate. So for that particular study, they used 2.2% for a discount rate.
Super, thank you very much.
Great. Okay, well, seeing no further questions from council, Jordan, thank you very much for your presentation. I appreciate it. Do we need a motion to receive that presentation? Will someone make that motion, please?
I'll make the motion.
Councillor Vervoort, seconded. I can't see if any hands are up, I'm sorry. Thank you, Deputy Mayor Nelson. All in favor? And that motion carries. Great, thank you very much. And moving on then to staff reports, we have a report related to this presentation from Mike Mood. Mr. Mood, over to you, sir.
All right, thank you, and through you, Madam Mayor Watson. The recommendation of this report that we have here, it's that the recreation facilities 2023-10 report dated November 7th, 2023, regarding GHG reduction pathway feasibility study be received, and that council approves these studies in the 2024 capital budget and allow Simcoe Refrigeration to apply on behalf of the Township of Douro-Dummer for the greenhouse gas reduction pathway feasibility grant at both the Warsaw and Douro Community Center. So essentially, you guys everybody saw the presentation from Jordan. This is a big first step for us securing some of these grants in the future. So a lot of, as Jordan indicated there, they are looking for the red screen and these energy efficiencies when we're applying for these grants. I do know Jordan specified that there is 4 grant funding opportunities, but that's what's available today. That's not what's available tomorrow or going forward. It will change. And she did indicate that there was one in February that was actually 80% funded and up to $10 million. So there's potentials for those bigger grants coming back, which again, if we start now by doing this study, it'll take some time, as Jordan indicated with the timelines, but at least that way, if there is a grant tomorrow that comes up that is really our interest, then we're ready for those studies. So that's my recommendation at hand, and if happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you for that. Councillor Watt?
Yes, thank you, through you, Madam Mayor. Looking at some of the presentation that Jordan did there was certain parameters in there that were per building or for portfolio buildings. This particular one that we're looking at here with the $40,000 each with 80% being applied for, is that kind of a different thing? Is that like per building, or is that like per arena, or is that we get one shot for the 2 arenas combined? I just want to have that clear in my mind.
Through Mayor Watson, you have one shot at the application for this actual grant. It is $65,000 per facility up to, but it's up to, correct me if I'm wrong, Jordan, it's I believe 165,000 or maybe more for an envelope of buildings.
200,000.
200,000.
Deputy Mayor Nelson?
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor. So does this also, I know it's kind of a little bit confusing. One grant does one another grant does. Does this actually, in the long run, actually do heat recovery for our buildings as well, like to reduce our cost for the heated portion of say the arenas? Will doing the study, and if we're lucky enough to get the grant money, does that include that part of it as well? Or, yeah, like the whole encompassing package, I guess I'm asking.
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor. Yes, essentially it will provide you with engineered solutions to achieve all these goals. This will come back and it'll have a list of a number of items. We don't have to do every single item that is proposed, but this is giving you your pathway to get to those net zero targets. So there will be, I'm assuming, Jordan, correct me if I'm wrong, but there would be heat recovery solutions that they'll recommend, and then they'll provide the engineered solution, the dollar costings of it to do it in our facility and stuff like that. So, but
one follow-up question, yes, if I might, Madam Chair. So will it also include in the study, I know we've spent a lot of money, or are spending a lot of money on a lot of equipment that we put in the arenas in the last while, and more maybe to come. Does that also take into account, I guess, the life cycle of what we actually got as far as our buildings and spending? I'm just looking at it telling us this study, we don't want to be spending good money into bad, I guess, if I could say it, put it that way. Or does it need to be a replacement of a lot of stuff and then look to upgrade the entire equipment? Does that make sense?
Yeah, and through your Madam Mayor, Deputy Mayor Nelson. So to my understanding, this is a roadmap because of the targets. There's the 2030, 2050 targets to reduce our emissions. So it will look at our current equipment and life cycle of that. So it will provide that roadmap and suggest them at certain increments of the years in that proposed time. And then they're also going to provide us with a 5-year plan. If we forgo the actual life cycle or the current life cycle of that piece of equipment, in 5 years, you want to achieve that, this is what it's going to cost. So yes, some of the equipment could last longer, but they're telling you in 5 years, if you want to hit those targets, that's your goal. But the 2030, 2050 plan for us will include the life cycle of each piece of equipment that we currently have.
Thank you.
Okay, so seeing no further questions, we're at the point here, folks, where we need to make a motion or some sort of discussion around the recommendation. Is there anybody?
I want to make the motion that we follow the recommendation.
Okay, so that's moved by Councillor Johnston. It looks like Councillor Watt, your hand is up to second that.
Yes, I will second it. Thank you.
Great. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing nothing, all in favor? And that motion carries. Thank you very much. And again, thank you, Jordan, for your presentation, Mike, for your ability to answer questions that came through. We are now simply just looking for a motion to adjourn. We'll be coming back for 5 o'clock on a different Zoom link for our regular council meeting. Councillor Vervoort, your hand is up. Is that a motion to adjourn?
Yes, it is.
Wonderful, thank you. And I think I saw Deputy Mayor Nelson's hand up as well. Wonderful, thank you. All in favor? And that motion carries. Thanks very much, everyone.
Thanks, Jordan.
Thank you.